Well, welcome back to our Lagos studio. We apologize for the technical hitch there. The president was just speaking and giving his inaugural speech over there. Thank you much for still staying with us. Now, joining us in our Lagos studio, we have the DG of the Lagos Chamber and Commerce and Industry, Lagos. Thank you very much, Muda Yusuf. It's a pleasure speaking with you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, the president just reeled out his speech there, and he was talking about accelerating economic growth and expansion, especially within the manufacturing sector. He talked about investment, stronger investment within rail, road and air transport. And he also looked at the fact that we also have to improve on expanding facilities to small, medium enterprises. Now, the dream of MKO Abiola was to see poverty alleviation be a success story in Nigeria. How do we then work on all of these issues that the president has raised now and consolidate on all these efforts?
Well, thank you very much, and happy Democracy Day. You see, when we talk about poverty, which of course is the dream of the late MKO Abiola, you cannot divorce poverty from investment. Two components of investment here. You have the private sector investment. You also have social investment coming from government. Those are the two key things that can really impact on poverty. When you talk about social investment, you'll be talking about things like provision of healthcare. The government has a major role to play there. If you want to do an appraisal of what we have had in the last 4 years, you'll be asking the question, how much investment have we made in healthcare? In the last couple of months, we have seen the debate about the quality of our public health institutions.
The budgetary allocation is really low as well.
Budgetary allocation, whether at the federal level, at the state level,
7% thereabouts.
Very low. And you can see that most of our public sector and public health institutions are really in a very parlous state. And God help any citizen that has any serious medical condition. You're on your own.
The president has to travel abroad.
And it's so expensive that many people have died because they can't afford maybe 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 to take care of themselves. It's really very bad. And these are the things that impact on the welfare of the people. Education is another thing. It's a major component of alleviating poverty. If you see the situation we have today in the northern part of the country, it has been aggravated because of the neglect of investment in education. You can see how it has degenerated from a literacy problem to a social problem. Now it has degenerated to a security problem. We have that problem now. It is not limited to that region. Almost the entire country is bearing the burden now. You see, so these things are key. When people struggle that, okay, I want the president to come from my region, I want the president to come from my region. The northern part have had presidents more than any part of the country since independence. Look at the situation with education, look at the situation with poverty in the northern part of the country. I'm not saying that we don't have similar issues, but it's much more there. And if you look at, if you do a mapping of the security problem, a mapping of the poverty problem, you will find a correlation between it and investment in social investment by government, either in education or in health. So that is on the social side. On the private investment side, the best way to create jobs in this economy is to incentivize investment. It could be private investment, it could be small-scale investment, it could be domestic investment, it could be foreign investment.
It's not as simple as this.
It could be domestic, diaspora investments.
The implementation is always difficult.
But we need to isolate it to know what each of these components can bring to the table. Because if you are doing a diagnosis of a problem, you have to break it down. What are we doing to stimulate domestic investment? Do we have the infrastructure in place? This government has been there for 4 years. Has the power situation improved over the last 4 years?
Some have called for a visitation of the privatization of the sector.
That is a big issue. Because if you say you want to create jobs, because you cannot alleviate poverty without providing jobs. And how many jobs can the government provide? So we need to see more investments in infrastructure so that jobs can be created. So domestic investors need to be supported. We need to create the environment for funding. Of course, we have a bit about this monetary policy, intervention funds, and all of that. The same thing with foreign investors. We also need foreign capital into this economy. Because if you look at the totality of the budget, how much is the budget? 9 trillion.
Yes.
This economy is about 130 trillion. What impact can 9 trillion budget have on a 130 trillion economy?
You just touched on the budget, and that also beats my mind, especially looking at the proportions of recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure.
Yes.
We always find out that our recurrent expenditure has always been double, almost triple sometimes. And do you think anytime soon down the line we would be able to reduce that percentage that has to go towards recurrent expenditure?
It's very difficult. The current administration has made some efforts, in fairness, to change the balance. Before now, we used to have about 20% capital, 80% recurrent. Now the commitment of the present administration was to rebalance it, to bring capital to 30%, and retain and reduce recurrent to 70%. I'm not sure we are there yet, but I know that there are some concerted efforts, at least to make sure that we get. But even if we get there, 70% to 30%, it is still very small. Because you cannot build the capacity of an economy if you continue to have that kind of investment in your capital budget. And it's not just capital budget. We should be talking more about infrastructure budget. Because it is through infrastructure investment that you can build the capacity of the economy to be diversified, and the capacity to raise productivity, and the capacity to raise revenue, and the capacity to create jobs. But the level of investment in infrastructure is very low. And in any case, where is the money? Unfortunately, we don't have the framework to sufficiently attract private capital into infrastructure investment.
Okay.
We don't have a good history of public-private partnership, for instance.
Okay, DJ LCCI, we just have to quickly cross back to Abuja and then get the updates from the President's speech. And when we come back, we'll be talking about the $45 million in external reserves so far and whether that's a step in the right direction. The President is still speaking, and we are crossing over now to the Eagle Square.
In tertiary and technical education to reposition Nigeria's workforce for the modern technological age. We will accelerate investments in primary, secondary, tertiary healthcare programs, intervention and infrastructure, as well as in upgrading of our medical personnel to stem the flight of our best trained people. On food security, our farmers have made great strides in local production of rice, maize, cassava, poultry, fertilizer, fisheries, and system. We remain resolute in supporting private sector in emphasizing backward integration and export expansion plans. Felling of trees to provide energy for domestic use is taking its toll on our rainforests, our ecology, and our climate. Accordingly, we are taking steps to harness cleaner and more sustainable source of electricity. We export more than 2 million tons of cooking gas, yet we consume less than 500,000 tons. We will work to address this issue and support rural communities with challenges of safety switching from firewood to cooking gas. Dedicated agro-industrial processing zones will be developed on a PPP basis to increase farming yields, agricultural productivity, and industrial output. Over 2,000 kilometers of ongoing federal road and bridge projects across the country will be completed to reduce journey times and the cost of doing business. As I mentioned earlier, critical feeder roads will be built to facilitate earlier, easier transportation for people and goods for rural areas to major roads. 8. We are at the advanced stage of securing investment to modernize and expand our transmission and distribution infrastructure, ensuring that electricity is available and affordable for all Nigerians. Several rail, seaport, and airport projects are at various stages of completion. We will open the arteries of transportation nationwide. J, it is a fact that Nigeria has more gas reserves than it has oil. Over the last 4 years, we have become a net exporter of urea, which is made from natural gas. We invite investors to develop more natural gas-based petrochemical projects. K, fellow Nigerians, this government will not tolerate actions by any individual or groups of individuals who seek to attack our way of life, or those who seek to corruptly enrich themselves at the expense of the rest of us. We will crack down on those who incite ordinary, innocent people to violence and unrest. We will ensure that such actions are met with a strong arm of the law. Nation building takes time, but we must take solace in the knowledge that this country, our country, has everything we require to make Nigeria prosper. Fellow Nigerians, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join me in this journey of rebuilding our nation. Our focus will not be to help the privileged few, but to ensure that Nigeria works for Nigerians of all persuasions. That is a more just arrangement. As we all know, correcting injustice is a prerequisite for peace and unity. As part of the process of healing and reconciliation, I approve the recognition of June 12 as Democracy Day and invested the late Chief Abiola and Babagana Kingibe with national honors, as I did with late Chief Gani Ferhemi. The purpose was to partially atone for the previous damage done in annulling the presidential elections of that year. Today, I propose the renaming of the Abuja National Stadium henceforth. It will be called Moshood Abiola National Stadium. In my first term, we put Nigeria back on its feet. We are working again despite a difficult environment in oil, on which we depend too much for our export. We encountered huge resistance from vested interests who do not want change, but change has come. We now must move to the next level. By the grace of God, I intend to keep oath I have taken today and to serve as president for all Nigerians. I thank you for attending this august occasion from far and near, and for all your best wishes to me, to our party, and to Nigeria. God bless us all. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
He deserves a standing ovation, please. Thank you. The maiden Democracy Day address by the special guest of honor. enough, Sir President, Commander-in-Chief, His Excellency.
And definitely, God bless Nigeria. That was Mr. President over there giving his speech. It's still the inauguration, the Democracy Day special, and we have been talking about business. I still have with me the Director General of LCCI. Thank you very much for still staying with us, Mr. Muda Yusuf. Now, before we went back to the President's speech, we were talking about the $45 billion external reserve so far. The President says that, well, that's a step in the right direction, and he hopes that we utilize these funds properly. What do you make of that statement?
Well, we have to celebrate cautiously when it comes to things like the foreign reserves, because we need to know what the components are. Because I know that you have quite a sizable amount of portfolio investments, portfolio flows, which are also part of the foreign reserves. We borrowed some money, some euro bonds and all of that. All those are also components of it. This has to be paid back. If we have any major shock in this economy, we are likely to see very serious portfolio reversals. And some of these components of it that are in the foreign reserve will also go back. So we need to be very cautious in the way we celebrate the 45 billion naira reserves. Of course, at that size, it gives some level of confidence, but we need to struggle to build an economy that is more sustainable.
How do we do this?
This economy is still too dependent on oil, and it's a very vulnerable economy.
You just heard the President's speech. Is dependent still on oil as well, production?
Yes, we need to move away from that. And the way to move away from that is to create the environment for the non-oil sector economy to thrive. And just as I said, for you to increase productivity in the non-oil sector, for you to get manufacturing up, to get agriculture up, to get even the services sector, ICT, broadcasting, name it. We have quite a number of sectors. We need to create the right kind of infrastructure environment. We need to create the right kind of policy environment. We need to create the right kind of institutional environment. And above all, we need to ensure that we have security of lives and property. If we don't have all of this, we continue to depend on oil. And the day we have a shock with oil, the entire economy will be dislocated.
And with all of the current volatility on the international market.
Yes. So the economy is still not on a sound footing. That is why it is very important that we focus very seriously on all our policy components. Our fiscal policy, macroeconomic policies, our monetary policy, interest rates, foreign exchange policy, our trade policy, import and exports. How are we managing it in a way to grow the economy? How are we dealing with issues of regulatory institutions so that they see businesses, they see investors as people or as a segment of the society that is contributing a lot to the economy, creating jobs and generating revenue? That mindset has to be there, especially from the bureaucracy and from the regulatory agencies.
Bismarck Ruwani, the economist, has said Nigeria is running counter-cyclical policies, and that's why we have some of the issues that still persist today. But now, in correcting some of these issues, the President also made mention, because we talked about electricity generation and then distribution, and then the President made mention of that the country is at advanced stages of modernizing electricity distribution, working on seaports and airports, and looking at feeder roads and making transportation easier within the rural areas. We know the rural areas is where we also see much of our agricultural production. But do you still see these elements, these components, even the export and expansion plans, do you still see them as promises rather than strategies that we've already put steps in place over the last 4 years?
We have had this several times over. It's not anything new, actually, what the promises that have been made. What we should be talking now is what we have done so far and what we still need to do and how we are going to do it. You know, a lot of these things require resources. We just talk about what the budget structure is. As we speak, we are spending over 2 trillion naira to service debt. That is a big burden. And we have a structure of budgeting now where By the time you take out the debt service component, which is over 2 trillion, by the time you take out the recurrent expenditure, which is also about 4 trillion, the total revenue is practically gone. So we now have an economy where even to fund all of these things, we have to be borrowing. And for how long can we continue to borrow?
So this brings our conversation back now to restructuring, not necessarily waiting for support from the center. At the end of the day, most of all of this agenda that you've raised are supposed to be projects that should be taken at state levels as well aggressively. But looking at agriculture, going back to that fact and diversifying our economy, we have different areas of comparative advantages, but we don't seem to utilize. What do you also expect this time around in terms of work being done at the state government level and then receiving additional support from the federal government?
Well, I think what needs to be done is to also position the state governments to do a lot more. Granted, many of them have issues with integrity, the management of resources and all of that. But we need to look again at what we call maybe the structure of the polity restructuring so that we have more resources also going to the states. Okay,
well, information just reaching us from our correspondent in Abuja says that the president is already leaving Eagle Square just about now, and it's still a packed event there. That's the president's convoy moving over there and being escorted out of the Eagle Square, and the day's celebration is slowly wrapping up. It's quite interesting. Well, so many delegates, heads of state governments, both within the region, outside the African continent, everyone is here. And on the sideline of today's celebration, we're also expecting that the president would also be having a security summit as well with other heads of government from Chad and neighboring countries as well. You touched on security also affecting how our economy is, because that's really defines how valuable we would have foreign investors come into play. What do you expect, Mr. President, to touch on today at the Security Summit?
Well, we need to touch on, now that it's talking about other neighboring countries, there is the climate change angle to the problem of security, especially in the northeast and northwest, because this is a predominantly agrarian communities, and because of issues of climate change, especially around the Chad Basin, there have been a lot of problem of poverty because the basic main means of survival has been affected
eroded,
by the climate change issue. So they can talk around the issues of how to revive the Chad Basin to ensure that the Lake Chad is better revived, so that all the communities around the Lake Chad can have their life back in terms of getting better engaged in terms of employment, engagement, and that will reduce the incentive, for them to now be engaged by the terrorists and all of that. And more importantly, we also need to strengthen intelligence, because I think we're a bit weak on intelligence. And you see, the war these days is not so much about how many arms, ammunition you carry around.
It's more strategic. How
strategic you are in terms of intelligence. So we need very strong investment in that as a country, and in collaboration with these other countries that the president will be meeting with.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Mr. Muda Yusuf, the DG LCCI.
Thank you very much.
Happy Democracy Day.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully, by the time we are celebrating this same celebration come next year, it will be a step in the right direction that would have moved.
Thank you.
And you're still watching our Democracy Day special. When we come back after a short break, the conversation continues. It's still the inaugural Democracy Day.